Good Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your afternoon is going well. Browns players with a day off, but some news off the field. Not all of it great either. Deshaun Watson has had another civil lawsuit filed against him from back in 2020. Houston woman who claims Watson sexually assaulted her on a date. Again, it was filed yesterday. We'll let the thing play out and see exactly what comes out from this, but definitely concerning. The NFL today said about that civil lawsuit filed yesterday, accusing Watson of sexual assault and battery, that they are reviewing the complaint and will look into the matter under the personal conduct policy, not the commissioner's exempt list. Just as a reminder, personal conduct policy was what Watson was suspended for previously under those allegations. And also Mike Hall Jr.'s court hearing on domestic violence charges scheduled for today has been rescheduled for September 19th. He is on the commissioner's exempt list. All right, that's all housekeeping. Let's turn our attention to football. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham. He's the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, takeaways from that Cowboys game. It was disappointing. There's no other. They didn't play well at all.
That's an understatement. That was the most flattest opening game I've seen, since some of those early games in 99, 2000. They just, they started okay, went right down the field, but those pre-snap penalties, I think, really kind of played into setting the tone. I mean, illegal formation and false starts by the tackles, and I think it played into the hands. I mean, obviously those tackles were jumpy with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence across from them, but it kind of killed that drive, and then it kind of set the tone as the game went forward. But yeah, it was all the way around. There wasn't any area you could point to that was really a positive other than Dustin Hopkins hitting a 51-yard field goal. Everything else was pretty flat.
Fans have been pointing to the fact that not a lot of the starters played in the preseason game, and if you do that relative to those penalties, I think you can make. I'll listen to that argument.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of teams don't play their starters or their quarterbacks much, if any, in the preseason. Don't have that, but as you said, you had James Hudson, DeJuan Jones, young guys at home. They got a little jumpy, and it wasn't just them. Your receivers dropped balls, those stopped drives. I mean, I made notes where, you were 1st and 10, picked up 4 or 5, 6 yards, and then you had a pre-snap penalty, and you're 1st and 15 or 2nd and 10 or 11 instead of having a short down and distance. But yeah, a lot of those things were your first time on the field in live action. We talked about, they emphasized the scrimmages with the Vikings, and I understand that, but you had referees there, and those referees, sent a memo to them reminding them that they're going to call that illegal formation big, and they were doing that in that scrimmage. Well, we talked to Stefanski before the game, like on the Friday before, and he said, yeah, we've really hammered that home. Well, still, there's something about a disconnect when you get out on the actual field with the crowd and everything going and your adrenaline flowing. It did, and they were not good. Those illegal formations are really, it's just like a defensive lineman when he just has to look at the ball to be lined up off sides. You have to be on the line of scrimmage, and hopefully to get that cleaned up, because you can't have 11 penalties. They had more yardage and penalties in the first 3 quarters than they did on offense. So you're shooting yourselves in the foot.
All right, so I guess the question is, what areas are you concerned? What areas that you saw concerned you most, and can most of the issues that they had against the Cowboys be fixed, do you think? And if you don't, what do you think? What's going to be the hardest for them to fix?
Well, the offensive line, it's easy to say, oh, you get Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin back in there and you'll be fine. But you still have two Pro Bowl guards and a center intact, and they still couldn't run the ball on the inside. And I mean, the stats were a little deceiving through three quarters. I think they had a total of 54 yards. They ended up with not that far behind the Cowboys. And it was kind of because the Cowboys got all theirs at the beginning and got out to a big lead, and the Browns got all theirs at the end in garbage time, so to say. So it concerns me they can't run the ball or they didn't run the ball, and all the way around in an offense. The passing game, I mean, you saw stats that Watson was like no completions over 15 yards or where he threw the ball downfield. He had no time. I mean, I saw a stat there was 40 quarterback pressures. 22 were his fault for hanging on the ball too long, which is on him. But 18 were on the offensive line or, where he had guys in his face. And so all the way around, it was concerning. Now, I will say this, Dave, a lot of people overlook the Cowboys are a pretty good team. They were 12-5, I believe, the last 3 years. They didn't do great in the postseason, but 12-5 is a better record than what the Browns had last year. And when you got Micah Parsons, Demarcus Lawrence, and they went out and got some run stoppers, that's a pretty good front. They had 6 sacks, 17 pressures, and on offense, the Cowboys were averaging just under 30 a game last year. The Browns defense didn't play great at all, but you were playing a pretty good opponent. So, I will say that.
All right, some news that relative to the roster as well. So yesterday, after we got off, so yesterday evening, Brown signed wide receiver Kadarius Toney, kind of a playmaker, a little bit of an enigma. Was a first-round pick. Was with the Giants. Was with the Chiefs. Fast guy, decent returners. They signed him. They also worked out some tight ends today, and a couple of these names will pop. Irv Smith, Jeff Swaim, our veterans, Tommy Sweeney. Remember, they're in the market for a tight end. David Njoku hurt his ankle week to week. They were looking before. Now it's even more important. And the Browns did sign a linebacker, Kaliki Hudson, off of the practice squad. And again, as you point out in this, Fields with his ankle, Diabate with his hip, they were down a few guys with the injury. So some of those are injury related. Toney is a guy that everybody's trying to figure out how to get him right because that's a former first-round wide receiver. You add him to the stable and you hope, is it going to be Judy? Is it going to be Moore? Is it going to be Toney? You hope one of them can be a big-time playmaker opposite of Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, this is in the wheelhouse of Andrew Berry, the guys that were high picks. If he really liked him in the draft, I'm assuming he did. He keeps an eye on when they become available. The most notable thing I remember Tony, I think it was last year, had that throwback play called back with Travis Kelce and the Chiefs because he lined up offsides. And yeah, he didn't work out for the Giants. He didn't work out with the Chiefs. I think it's a good move with the practice squad because I mean, that's a very he's being paid, I believe, by his former team, and the Browns are only liable for a practice squad type, which is minimal comparatively. And if nothing else, you get a good look at somebody, in practice every day who could run the jet sweep. The Browns defense continually has trouble with that last year, and CeeDee Lamb the other day, had some big gains on those. And so, if nothing else, you get a look at him in practice, running against you. And who knows? Maybe he can get the fresh start here and can re-energize. There's guys like that bounce around for whatever reason. I haven't followed him that closely, but I think he was the 20th pick in the draft. You think of Jerry Jeudy, I think he was the 15th pick in the draft. So Andrew Berry keeps an eye on those guys. Low risk, high reward. I mean, you don't have to worry too much about, you know, like you're sacrificing somebody for him. If he shows something, they can find a place for him.
Do you like either Swaim or Smith for what the Browns need?
Yeah, I know Smith a little more. I mean, I don't think any of the options are that great. We talked about this. Of course, the Browns chose to be very thin at tight end. Only two tight ends on the roster, in Njoku and Akins, and they didn't really have that much on the practice squad. They signed the 49ers,
Mm-hmm.
Cameron
Yep.
Letu last week, and they had another guy, Blake Whiteheart. But the guys they had in training camp, they moved on from. So now, of course, Njoku gets hurt, so you're extremely thin. I thought they would try to trade or acquire somebody, maybe in the final cuts that was going to get released, or use one of your bonuses. But right now, that's where you're at. You're not getting great options, so it's going to be a patch job. And I guess I'm more familiar with Smith or Swaim, whoever they think is the best, to help out in that area. And the way the pass rush, broke down last week, I think the tight ends real important to help out if it's Wills comes back or Conklin comes back, or even they stay with Dewan Jones and James Hudson. You need help. I think Nick Harris can help. Maybe you can find a way to help him go out there and help block.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, love the show, long-time viewer. Just want to hear your opinion on them signing Kadarius Toney. In my opinion, you have other glaring needs that you need help at than to bring on another subpar wide receiver. I mean, you've got so many young guys. You just got rid of David Bell. Did they get rid of him to make room for Butterfingers Toney? I think they should have addressed maybe a tight end or a tackle, but no, they do the typical Cleveland thing and go bring in a wide receiver who is really not that good. Besides, you have Cooper, Judy, Moore, and you still got some young guys that are decent, but you bring in a guy who can't catch the pass on a regular basis when you have other glaring needs after Njoku's day-to-day ankle sprain and left tackle needs. I just think that was a waste of a move. Just want to hear your thoughts. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Fred, I'm with you. It's a low-risk, high-reward move. They're not paying him a lot. It's not like going out and getting Kadarius Toney is going to keep him from getting a tight end, or I don't think they're looking for a left tackle. They aren't out there. What he does have is he's got speed, and they're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. I think.
Well, as I just talked about, this isn't to the 53-man roster. I agree they have other needs. This is to the practice squad, which is kind of like your farm system. They have a couple wide receivers on the practice squad, already, and they feel like he's an upgrade over Tulu Griffin. He's on the practice squad. James Prochet. They elevated Jalen Darden. By the way, David Bell was re-signed to the practice squad, so he's back there as well. They're just taking a look at him. And again, it's a low risk. You're not cutting somebody in order to add him to the practice squad. And you could use him on the scout team and see what he has, while, to your point of the speed, have him run jet sweeps and just let the defense practice trying to catch him and not get exploited in the games the way they have with those fast wide receivers, going on the edge. So again, I don't think that's a problem. And again, there's got to be guys that are better than what you have. I mean, if there was a better option at tackle, I think they would have brought him in. They got 3 tackles on their practice squad right now, but they don't feel that they're a better option than what they have. I think they're really hoping Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills are ready to go. In some of the other positions, yes, tight end. I've been talking about that for a long time, that you really need a veteran tight end that can plug in. It's too thin to have two. And now they have one with Njoku hurt.
All right, this from CBS Sports. One thing we learned about each team, and for the Browns, they say, Browns, Deshaun Watson may not last again, in parentheses. So, it would take, I think it would take quite a bit for them to move on from Watson. I was disappointed with the way he played. I guess there's no other way to say it. I thought he didn't look good. And I'm one of the guys that has been a guy that has said, let's see. I thought he'd look better.
Well, I agree. I mean, I put a projection out that I thought he would, have a big comeback and be in line to be comeback player of the year. He still could be. I mean, a little perspective. Yes, it was bad a year ago, just in the big picture. He didn't play that great, but they beat the Bengals. Then they went over to Pittsburgh and had a debacle, where he threw the pick six and fumbled the ball late and lost the game. But then they went on. He got hurt. He had his best game in the third game, and that's when he started the downhill with the injury. So, I know he looks dismal. You can come back against a good Jaguar team, though, and turn things around and still be 1-1, the same as what you were last year. You won your first, lost your second. If you do it in reverse this year, you're right where you want. I think these first 5-6 games, you have a chance to kind of get your footing, and a lot of that is going to be on Watson. They've got to get it where he can get the ball out quick and get in a rhythm. That first drive, he had a little rhythm. They went right down the field. The best drive, that 75-yard drive, they went right down the field. He seemed to get in a rhythm. Both those, I believe, were in hurry up or in tempo. I would almost like to see them start with that. Get him some quick completions, maybe not even more than just one. Have an option, go right to him, a quick slant or a quick out to get him going, get the drive going, because he seems to play best like that. And so I think ultimately it's going to reverberate on him. The defense has to start better. I was disappointed in the way they started, and the special teams as well. So all the way around, it was disappointing. But it's, as we know, I think the Cowboys are a pretty good team. And a lot of people, we talked about Jim Schwartz last year, what a big, addition that was. A lot of people aren't talking about Mike Zimmer going to the Cowboys to be on their defensive coordinator, puts them right in position, to maybe be in the NFC, a chance to go to the Super Bowl, because their defense is improved and they have a good offense. So, I think the Browns have a chance to kind of right the ship. We kind of tend to overreact on one game. Yeah, if they play the exact same way this week and they're 0-2, yeah, you might start to put up the panic button a little bit.
All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I hear a lot of stuff about Deshaun Watson, how bad he is. And yeah, he is pretty bad. But again, the two-time coach of the year who calls the plays, who's designed this offense. It's not Ken Dorsey. It's still his rinky-dink generic crap. 3rd down and 10. We don't even have a guy go out for a pass over 10 yards. We always throw a 4-yard pass on 3rd down. I thought that we were supposed to have this wide open offense. It'll always be his offense, and we will go nowhere. The next thing our Browns will probably do is trade Deshaun Watson and dump him, and it'd probably be the best thing that'll happen to the gentleman, because he'll go on, go to a real team, and be a good quarterback again, because that's usually what the Browns end up doing. Again, until we get rid of Stefanski, we're going nowhere, guys. Take care.
Well, I think he hit the panic button already, but I digress. The one thing I will say, did the offense appear to be a little disjointed to you? It was almost like they couldn't decide if they wanted to run, the shotgun or under center and do play action. It just, there wasn't a flow to it in my mind, just when I watched it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I watched it too, I couldn't tell you what they were trying to do. I got the idea you're going to try to get the ball out quick and, get into the playmakers. And then they got behind and, you saw Watson scrambling around out there. I think the thing I'm most concerned about, I read something that he averaged 3.1 seconds per release, and that's too long. He's got to get rid of the ball quicker. I realize some of that's because he was scrambling around when he didn't see openings, but they just have to get him in a position or get a receiver, lined up and get the ball to him quick so he can get more in a rhythm. I didn't see at all what they were trying to do. I thought they didn't run the ball really well, but they didn't even really try until really late in the game. And so all the way around, you kind of gotta get an identity what you want to do. And we all know what the identity was when Nick Chubb was playing, you know, let him run, get him the ball, and a lot of things fell into place. Well, you don't have him right now, and you got to get an identity. If you're going to try to set up the run through the pass, you got to get a completion on first down and set up a 2nd and 3 or something like that, and not be in these 2nd and 8, 3rd and 9 situations because you're setting yourself up for failure. So I would just like to see him, get into whatever you're going to do it, get into a rhythm and go with it. And I saw the most in the hurry up, and that was by necessity because they were behind, quite a bit.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
My name's Anthony, longtime Browns fan. Yeah, we're moving on to week 2. A lot of fans are going to dwell on this game, but here's another thing people haven't talked about. You let one of the best offensive line coaches in Mr. Callahan leave to go coach with his son in Tennessee. And I'm aware that the offensive line has injured, but you're losing some chemistry coaching-wise, and offensive line, even the backup offensive linemen, they respected Callahan. This guy made everything gel. Even when we had the injuries, he got backup guys that don't play a lot to play better. And losing Callahan, I think it's going to hurt the team. I think they actually set the team back at least 2 years. You can find a better offensive line coach than Callahan, but that's just my take on it. I haven't thrown in the towel on Watson yet, but we got to give him a chance. If he continues to struggle like this the rest of the season, then the experiment is over. It'll go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history, if not pro sports history. Thank you for listening to my call. Go Browns.
As always, appreciates all of the voicemails. Fred, I don't know that it's Andy Dickerson, but it is a different system, so they're probably doing some things a little differently, and I think that's probably a valid point. The offensive line has to figure out exactly how they're going to block and play off of each other.
There's so many variables. I agree. Bill Callahan, is regarded as one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, and it's a loss to lose him. But, in the rushing game, for example, they were top 5, I think, not last year, but the previous years, and they had Nick Chubb. Last year, they dropped down to middle of the pack. Was it because they didn't have Nick Chubb or because of the offensive line? So I think a little of it goes hand in hand. So are they struggling because they don't have Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills? or is it because they don't have Bill Callahan and throw in Nick Chubb in the running game? So, I mean, there's so many variables. I think sometimes it's a little overrated, but yes, we saw Callahan would take guys off the street like Garen Christian last year when they were down to their fourth left tackle option, and he just played, and you didn't really, hear much about him. So he didn't do that bad of a job after losing the top three guys. But he also was the proponent to wanting Jedrick Wills with the 10th pick in the draft. And so, you know, okay, there were some other guys that turned out better than that. So it's it's all the way around. I think he's a technician and can really teach them and work with what they have. But I can't put my finger on, and I'm not going to after one game, 1 week. I really think you need to have all your pieces back in the lineup. And I think they were counting on all three of them tackles being back, I think, or they would have drafted a tackle or signed, maybe a better tackle than what they did for depth. Um, I mean, it's hard for me to believe that Jedrick Wills had the same type injury, is my understanding, than DeJuan Jones, and he's the farthest to be ready to go compared to Jones and Conklin and himself. So we'll see what happens. One game, lot to blame. See how they go from here.
All right, what are some keys to the game against the Jaguars now? What do the Browns need to do to get a win? In my mind, week 2 becomes that much more important because you lost week 1. You don't want to start 0-2, and you know what's on the other side of the bye.
Yeah, it was, I always have one of these unwritten rules in the NFL. It was like, I thought it'd been better for the Browns if the Jaguars could have hung on and beaten the Dolphins. Then they're 1-0. Then it wouldn't be as big a deal for them. But now both teams are 0-1. So there's a stat about going 0-2 and chances of making the playoffs and all that. With the expanded playoff, there's a little more wiggle room, but yeah, it's big. I mean, it could be a vault because then you play the Giants at home, then you go to the Raiders away, and then you come back, or no, you go to the Commanders. So you have a chance, I think, to win 3 in a row after this week. If you could get a win here on the road, you have a chance to come out of the first 5 games, 3-2 or 4-1, and so I just think that it is a big game, and I think Jacksonville's a playoff team, and they've been pretty formidable. Browns beat them last year, but I believe Lawrence played, but I think he was kind of hobbling on an ankle. So yeah, again, it's tough every week in the NFL, and so it's going to be tough for the Browns, but it's a chance for them to get up, and I think the defense has really got to rise to the occasion and slow down the Jaguars and give the offense a chance to get their footing.
Fred Greetham, Senior Analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Thank you, Dave.
Fred Greetham, again, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. He is the Senior Analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. We're talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. After a couple of days to calm down, I just want to ask, why does Stefanski hire Ken Dorsey, yet refuses to give up play calling. What is the point of hiring a new offensive mind only to tuck him away during game day? Don't get me wrong, I absolutely believe in Stefanski, but I'm just genuinely confused as to why he just refuses to give up play calling. Now, from the couch, watching on TV, he looked uncomfortable calling Dorsey's plays. And I'm sure Dorsey has his own rhythm, his own cadence, his own ideas of when to call, how to call it, and why to call it. I just wish Stefanski would just swallow his pride and give up the responsibility of calling plays so he could concentrate on being the head coach of the team and relegate the duties to his staff. I just think there may be too many voices in Watson's head. What say you? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Jake, there's a couple things with that. Number one, Kevin Stefanski earned the right to be a head coach based on his offense, his play calling ability, and those kind of things. And the other thing is Ken Dorsey's a really good quarterback coach, and I think they really want him to work with Deshaun Watson. That's kind of my reaction to it. Just what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's the framework of like someone's calling someone else's plays is just not how it works. They work in a collaborative effort to build out how they want an offense to look. It's not like Ken Dorsey comes and slaps his playbook down on the desk and says, all right, this is what we're using this year. It's a baseline of what Kevin has done, the verbiage Kevin has used, and then they try to infuse the thoughts, ideas, and concepts from the guys they brought in. Obviously, heavily included by Ken as the offensive coordinator with the title, but also by Tommy Rees, and then also by others that have come into the building. And there's been a lot of new names: Andy Dickerson, Deuce Staley. It's a potpourri of styles they're trying to melt together to form one offense that is cohesive for the quarterback that they have in place. So I just think that the idea people have of this is Ken Dorsey's offense that Kevin is calling, it's not how it works. Ken is coming into Kevin's world where it's been in place for 4 years and is trying to infuse a lot of the way he thinks about football through Kevin's recommendation into the fold of what they do. So again, there's a lot of assumption that happens here that just because Ken Dorsey is on the sideline or whatever, he could call a better game. And there's also the assumption that Kevin doesn't pull recommendations from him on a down-to-down basis. It's a world that we live in where we complain about play calling that we know like 5% of what goes into that, from pregame to the game plan execution. And it's just a world that I prefer not to get too carried away or too swept up in because we don't know enough about it. Ultimately, what will happen is if the offense isn't good enough, Kevin will be held accountable for that. That will happen in due time. And I don't think that just throwing your hands up in the air with an assumption that Ken Dorsey would be better at this right away is a world I also don't want to be in. So it's tricky, and I understand the people are upset after the first week, but I think we know an answer to something that we just generally have no idea how it operates. So I just kind of would hold on to that stuff and with an understanding that if you're anti Kevin and his approach, like it's going to be his bottom line eventually. So he has to make the right choice. And it's a bunch of choices that we don't understand and we're not privy to anyway, because they're just things that we are, again, not able to understand on the outside looking in.
When you looked at this offense, I saw elements of what I expected, and I saw elements of Kevin's old offense, and it seemed like it was very disjointed. When you went back and looked at it, what did you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's disjointed because they didn't take advantage of opportunities. Like it's hard to get into a rhythm when you get into some second and mediums and then immediately, go backward, right? Every team in the NFL, if you put them in a bunch of 3rd and 8+, 3rd and pass, which is what I call that, they're going to look bad. Like that's just not a world that anyone wants to live in. And the Browns actually had some decent success running the football to put them into second and mediums. But of 12 second and mediums they found themselves in, only 5 of those resulted in first downs on that set of plays ensuing, right? Like that's not good enough to be in second and medium and struggle, because we all know that they had 11 penalties on offense that put them in a bunch of disadvantageous situations, including several illegal formation penalties and illegal motion and then false starts. Like they just were working in reverse too often. So it's hard to get a real feel for what they want to be when they're self-harming too often to be in any place that puts them in those run-pass conflicts that makes defense really hard. So I think we got to give it some time. I would give this 5 weeks to see like how they handle things when they stop shooting themselves in the foot a little bit and find some rhythm moving up and down the field, and then we'll get a better feel for it. I just think it's too early, and I understand where people are coming from with this, but it's too early to sort of put out definitive statements about what you think is wrong. We need to gather a bunch more evidence.
Is there anything that you saw when you went back and looked at the tape that's concerning, or what is the most concerning thing that you saw offensively? And we'll get into defense next segment, but I'm sticking to the offensive side.
Yeah. I mean, the quarterback play was bad. I think he's inviting a lot of pressure in a way that puts him in a position to be the guy he used to be before the injuries have mounted up for Deshaun Watson. I don't think he's processing the field well enough. I don't think the micro accuracy, which I mean by that is like ball placement, where he's putting the football for his receivers to allow them to catch and run, any of that is in a good place. I don't think he's making something out of nothing the way he used to in his Houston days when he was obviously 3-4 years younger now and didn't have a severe shoulder injury and doesn't have the wear and tear in place that we've seen. I just don't think like he made a living in the Houston days largely operating heroic football, like taking on punishment in the pocket, getting out of it. And he's still doing some of that, but you can just see that he's not able to win in that way consistently anymore. So when you can't live in this unpredictable world of getting out of chaotic NFL structure and you have to live within the confines of, putting yourself mentally out in front of what the defense is doing, when you lean into the chaos, your outcomes and your range of outcomes as you age get significantly worse. And I think he's got to change his approach to playing quarterback to ever be a really efficient top 15 quarterback again, because he wasn't seeing the field well. The accuracy wasn't in place. And I continue to see him inviting pressure into his lap in the pocket. So all of which is very concerning. I would say that the offensive line, Joel Bitonio struggled in this one. Probably some of the worst pass blocking from him I've seen in a long time, because he's been so good for so long. I will see if he bounces back, but that wasn't good. And like I said, the wide receivers had their share of opportunities that they could have helped with too. You don't get an offensive performance like we saw on Sunday without it being nearly everybody. I mean, it was that bad. Like everybody had a hand in this, the coaching included. So nobody is without blame, and they got to collectively figure it out. And that's what you want to see. It was really disappointing in the opener, and nobody wants that. But it's not wholly unexpected based on how the injury issues went in training camp and a lack of preseason reps. So from there, it's like what we liked about this team last year and what ultimately won Kevin some awards is that they were very resilient. They bounced back and they handled themselves against a bunch of negativity in a really very constructive way. So let's see how they handle that in Jacksonville.
When you look at it, are the things that you saw correctable? And is it as simple as, man, don't get behind the sticks early? It seemed like they were starting first and 15 an awful lot.
Right. Well, the Dallas defense is good. They were good last year, up in the top 5 of the league, and they I think improved their defensive coordinator for the personnel they have. So you're not going to see a defense like Dallas every week. So that's something to keep in mind. They will block better. I have no doubt about that. They will get healthier up front, including that left tackle position. And I certainly think that they will not have as many drops as they had in this game either. That won't be a continual thing. But the root case of all of this is just the quarterback has to be better. I mean, that's the conversation we're having in the preseason is how good is he and how far can he take them? I think the elements around Watson will be better. I just am hesitant to fully commit to the idea that Watson will be the guy that I think people want to believe he is. And that is a troublesome scenario to be in.
Yeah, without question. Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about the Browns defense. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones. Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones. Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones. Diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I don't know why everybody, all the fans, all the media are trying to blame one person, Deshaun Watson. And it's crazy how we can sit up here and be like, oh, it's Deshaun Watson's fault that we played piss poor. It's one of the reasons why we lost the game, or it is one of the reasons why we lost the game. But at the same time, what was Kevin and Ken doing for him to be successful? We have to ask ourselves that question. Not just Deshaun, but the team. The running game sucked. The passing game was atrocious. The wide receivers wasn't catching anything. Cooper didn't catch anything. And Joker didn't catch anything. So it's hard to put the blame on one person.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jake, we'll get to the defense in a minute, but, the quarterback touches the ball on every play, so either rightly or wrongly, they get blamed more than they probably should, and maybe get credited more than they should. But it was not a good game for Deshaun Watson. I mean, I'm a guy that's defended him. He didn't look good.
No. We hit on this a few minutes ago. It was a performance that featured a bunch of his limitations. And I think the thing that you're hoping for with your quarterback, you're paying that kind of money to and invested the kind of assets it took to bring him to Cleveland, was that he would be able to elevate those around him. And that's clearly not happening. Right. And to the point of the voicemail too, like recognizing that everybody around him wasn't very good in this game. It did not all fall on his shoulders, but when you sort of think about the confidence you have that certain elements of this are going to rectify themselves in the coming weeks, it is hard to envision that Watson is going to be much different than what we saw on Sunday. There could be some moments that he's better and deliver some throws here and there, but I just am like, is this guy going to be a top 15 quarterback again? It's really hard to make that leap of faith. So I am fully recognizing that he was not the only player on that offense that played bad. I don't think he was the only member of the key brass making decisions around it, play calling and executing the plays, that wasn't very good either. But that doesn't absolve him from being really bad. So I think that there's the world where a couple things can be true at the same time, right? We can walk and chew gum and make that happen all at once. So that's definitely the way I frame it.
When you look at the defense, the numbers aren't as bad. The special teams gave up a punt return, which kind of killed them. When you looked at the defense on tape, I was a little disappointed. I thought with 2 rookie offensive linemen that the Browns' defensive line would be able to dominate, and they did a nice job of kind of scheming around it.
Well, yeah, they put together 2 long drives in the first half that put the game almost out of reach. I mean, that was probably the goal of Dallas, was like to limit the dangerous parts of the Browns defense. Let's limit the opportunity those guys have to get after us, right? So we're going to stay ahead of the sticks early in downs. We're going to get some situations where we can get Dak moving out of the pocket. We're going to get him rolling out. We're going to get some sprint out concepts. We're going to move things around, not going to sit in the pocket and give Miles and the group a chance to get after him in a very meaningful way. Often they did a great job of that stuff, and they put together, like, the defense is getting ignored for the most part here, but they gave up, like I said, 210 yards in the first half, and that's pretty unacceptable for the group. And the second half was better, but I just thought Dak Prescott missed throws in the second half, and like, there was a third drive in the first half where it was a third down on an eighth play of a drive, and he just missed an out route that was wide open. So you don't get credit for that, as a defense, when you didn't do the thing that forced them to miss it. Just a quarterback missed it. So I think that, the framework here is that the defense thinks they're one of the best in the NFL, and they were last year at times really, really great. But they also struggled with any competent quarterback and play calling combination, and were bad on the road away from their home crowd. and they needed to rewrite some of those things, and we didn't see that. And we saw some of the same things creep into play, which is defenses know the places they can attack them to avoid the really, really dangerous spots that the Browns have, right? Like Cowboys said, we're going to get CeeDee Lamb in space and throw it quick to him. We're going to give him fades up the sideline and let him operate. And like, that was a clean game plan to really mess with the things the Browns defense does well and keep Dallas in situations that were more neutral. And it worked out because they knew the Browns offense was going to be basically locked up inside the gates, right, of the Cowboys defense. And they just needed to put a couple drives together. And then at that point, it's 17-3 at half. And it's basically just park the bus style on offense. Just don't turn the football over and let the clock run, because our defense isn't going to allow Cleveland to do anything. And then you get the added bonus of a punt return touchdown too that really put the game out of reach for good.
Yeah, that one was the one where it was like, well, this isn't going to happen. The other thing that happened again, Browns lost the turnover battle. And that the one thing you can't do with a good dominant defense is turn the ball over on offense, because that puts your really good defense kind of behind the 8 ball all the time.
Yeah, no, it does. It's the Browns have to live in this world where the defense keeps them in. Think back to the 49ers game last year that was led by P.J. Walker as the quarterback. That's sort of the framework for where they are right now. An offense that is going to struggle most of the time on the football field. And again, there are bigger conversations to be had about the offense, but that offense is going to struggle. And then the defense needs to be really good, like all game long, really good. That's just the cards they're dealt here. That's not their fault, but they can complain about it and be upset and ultimately quit on games because the offense doesn't do anything. But like, their job is to keep teams out of the end zone at whatever cost is possible. And if they can't be the driving force this year, then you start to get really worried about how they win a bunch of ball games, especially the early ones here that they have to win, where the offense is going to be trying to figure out who they are and how they can find some form of consistent success. So yeah, I was really bummed out by the way the first half went for this defense, because they needed to be lights out and they just weren't. And I thought Dallas knew the places to attack them and took advantage of where they know this defense has vulnerabilities. And if you can stay out of 3rd and long often, which Dallas did, you have a chance to put some points on the board against them. And that was tough to watch, because again, you go into Browns games thinking we can lean on the defense to keep this thing close. Well, all of a sudden it's 17-3 in the first half and it's not close at all. So challenging altogether to feel a bunch of optimism after this one. But I do think the defense will be fine. It's just like they need them to be really, really good again. And I'm worried that that's going to replicate.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me, another thing that surprised me, the Cowboys were able to run the ball with Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdell more effectively than they should have been.
Yeah, the inside zone stuff is a problem. I do think that you would look at that and you sort of peel back the tape, you could see run lane situations that I just wasn't confident was going to happen. And so they've always been a team that struggled with pen pull, putting the ball on the perimeter, jet sweeps. Those were in full display again. But if teams are able to run the football between the small tackle box, which I consider the inside foot of each tackle, then the Browns could have some issues this year, because that is an area that they have to be really, really good at in order to get them into those situations on 3rd and long, which they can create so much havoc. So, yeah, the run game stuff, it wasn't great for Dallas by any stretch, but they were able to use it to alleviate situations where it could have been longer down in distances. And that is something they have to avoid. They just have to get into putting defenses in as many 3rd and longs as they can.
All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, folks, rough start for sure. If you happen to see the Kyle Brandt segment Sunday about Week 1 overreactions, he cited a number of Week 1 games in the past where teams got blown out, came back, and crushed it in the playoffs. So I, for one, am hanging in there. I can't and won't forget the 3 games Deshaun played great in last year. The Tennessee, Arizona, especially the Baltimore game where he was badly injured and played through it. Basically willed the team to victory. It's way too early to pack it in. We could lose to the Jags, but then we have 3 games we should be favored. Let's go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jake, the one thing is you lost the opener at home. You were better at home than on the road. there's a lot more pressure than there probably should be to go into Jacksonville and beat a pretty good Jaguars team.
Yeah, Jaguars gave Miami fits, and that offense is really good. So take that for what it's worth. There is pressure to get this one done. I think the voicemailer has a fair point where you're talking about then they come back and have a chance to play 3 games they can win. So, the idea of getting to 3-2 is not awful, but you got to look at how they get to the bye week and say that out of the bye week scenario where they're playing a bunch of brutal games and including some tough road games and then like 2 Thursday night games in a 1-month span, you need to put yourself in a great position, at least 6 or 7 wins in the first half of the schedule. So every single one of these games has to be played well. Like they don't have a chance to have many of those that they had in week 1. Like maybe you get your one mulligan there in week 1 and all of that. And listen, the point made by Kyle Brandt is fair too. The Browns got blown out in Baltimore in 2020 in the opener, Kevin's debut, and then came back and won a playoff game that year. It's possible. It's all very possible. But in the sake of breaking down what evidence we have on the field, it's hard to really like jump to that conclusion that, hey, it's going to happen. It's going to happen because we need to see it. And they have a great chance against Jacksonville. Maybe you catch Jacksonville a little bit of a situation where there's a lull between, losing that game that they probably should have won and presuming that they can beat a team like the Browns that was really bad in week 1. I can't wait I for one can't wait to watch it because they need to be better and they need to bounce back in a very meaningful way. Going out on the road sometimes can help in that regard. And again, it's a chance to continue to prove that they belong, and we'll see. Because that's a Jacksonville team that can be feisty and a potential playoff team in and of itself too. And this game will mean something to AFC wildcard type standings.
Jake Burns and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. We're going to take a look at some quarterback numbers that are disturbing. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. This is from the NFL show on PFF, Trevor Sikkema, on what he's seen from Deshaun Watson.
If we get the Houston Texan version back, if we get the Houston Texan version of Deshaun Watson back, I don't think it's coming back. Like, I don't think that there's a lot to point to say that that version of Deshaun Watson is still in the cards even at this point, especially for a sustained period of time. Maybe you might get flashes here and there, but to believe that he was like the MVP caliber quarterback that he was with Houston before the injury, before the holdout, before the trade, I just don't see it with him. And especially when you look at, he hurt his shoulder last year, and then he broke his arm when he tried to kind of come back to play. He was suffering from what they called general arm soreness in training camp in the preseason. Buddy, I think that is much more worrisome than they were leading on to believe. And I think that you saw that in how he played against Dallas. He had the most dropbacks of any quarterback in week 1, 56. Yet he was just 19th in passing yards at 169. This is the part that really gets me. And if you watch the game, when Deshaun tried to open it up and really push the ball deep down the field, he was a loose cannon. I mean, the accuracy was all over the place for him. On passes of 15 yards or more down the field, this is really the stat that tells the story for me. Passes of 15 or more yards down the field, 0 for 7. He did have one drop, but a 14.3% adjusted completion percentage. He wasn't even getting it close. He wouldn't even get these passes close. We're talking 15 yards down the field.
Jake, we've talked about it a little bit, and I don't want to read too much into the arm soreness. That might have been they didn't want to play him in the preseason, but throwing the ball down the field is a concern, and I didn't need the stat to tell me he was missing by a lot.
footballs were thrown out of bounds, like 5, 6, 7 yards out of bounds. Like there were some throws that I was watching back-to-back throws in the red zone. They ultimately scored on this drive, but there's one up the left side on a Jerry Jeudy double move that he throws so far out of bounds, a tunnel employee catches. And then on the very next play to Amari Cooper up the right side, a Browns like stadium staffer catches. It's so far out of, it's like, I don't know what's going on, man. And then the following drive out, he put one that was like 7 yards out of bounds on the left side that CeeDee Lamb caught on the sideline. These are not even close. I have no confidence in the downfield throwing stuff. That's on top of the stuff that we saw him struggle with in the micro accuracy and like the short and intermediate range stuff. So on top of processing, seeing, and making the right decision, there's also delivering the football in an accurate way downfield where it's toughest. And the evidence from week 1 is not encouraging. And I think that's the fair way to put it. And Trevor is spot on about that.
All right. This is from the 33rd team. And I have to thank all of the Sooner fans who sent this to me via social media, calling me a Baker Mayfield hater. Not really true. I'll get into that in a minute. But it is starting quarterback's EPA per dropback, and it's from True Media. It excludes last night's games. Baker Mayfield was number 1 in the NFL, 0.64 yards. Josh Allen was second, 0.46. Patrick Mahomes, 0.32. Deshaun Watson was minus 0.37. That's 26th, only better than Caleb Williams, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, and Will Levis. Again, I defended Baker Mayfield when he was here. Baker Mayfield is an adequate NFL quarterback. But if you want to revisit, the Browns shouldn't have traded for Baker Mayfield, I revisit, well, the Browns probably should have drafted Josh Allen. But I digress from all of that. Minus EPA per dropback is really, really, really troubling.
Yeah, it's there's no other way to put it than that. Performance was collectively awful to drop back as many times as they did and to be under 200 yards and really have no productive downfield passing game. And like most of those yards kind of sort of came when Dallas was like out of neutral situations and definitely knew, that they just needed to keep things funneled in front of them. Right. So I am not optimistic about it in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, to your point about the Baker Mayfield stuff, like Baker's on the cusp of being out of the league and has resurrected himself. And I will pull for Baker Mayfield from afar, wherever, that's great. Good I'm happy for him, but it wasn't working here. And he probably needed to go on a little bit of a self journey to figure out what it took to get where he's at now. And that couldn't happen in Cleveland for him. The Browns made the decision on Watson. They're going to live with that. They're going to have to solve their way out of it at some point. We'll see when that day comes. But, the fact of the matter is people have tried to stand up for this football team in the belief that he, when healthy and could play, would be good enough to be a difference maker again. And like my theory for the week is like, okay, well, he didn't give you any evidence that that's going to happen. And, I actually think he contributed a significant amount more cause for concern than anything else. So it's not in a good place, Dave. It's not in a good place in the slightest. And we'll see. He's going to have, like, the Browns are going to play him. Like, people are like, well, just cut him. Well, outside of the things that are happening around him on the legal side now, again, they're not going to cut him unless it gets to that point that the NFL steps in. But he is going to play until the Browns have proven that he just cannot absolutely play anymore. Like, they are going to prove to themselves before they end up ultimately removing him, because when you do decide to move on from him in terms of starting Jameis Winston or Dorian Thompson-Robinson over a healthy Deshaun Watson, you are done. Like, you are officially done with that player. There's no walking it back. So they want to make sure to the absolute certain point he cannot do this anymore, because they still have so much invested in him. So if he gives you this inkling that maybe if he just continues to play, he'll work through this and we can see it work a little bit better in 25, then they have so much money already committed there, they'll write it out. But like, you have to understand that walking away, the significant amount of money it does, like he has to prove that he just flat out cannot do it above any level of getting out there and playing anymore. Like, I think a thing that you could hold on to is he's played so little football in the last 3 years that you could see him just kind of working himself back into things and getting better. And I think that's a part of the Browns' plan, is spending this year like figuring out whether he can do this again. And if he can't do it and it gets to the point that it's so awful by mid-season, they'll maybe make a move. right? And that would spell the end of this. But you have to understand that they're walking away from 25 and 26 with gigantic cap hits. So you're looking at a situation where you need to be 100 million% certain that you can't get anything out of that football player anymore. And that's why he will continue to play until he hits a breaking point.
Jake Burns, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Jake, tell us again where we can find you.
Yeah, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. We do, some pretty unique film work stuff over there. Try to cover the Browns in a different way than a lot of people do, providing context to what's happening on the field with a community-driven group that is enjoying being around each other and talking Browns all day, every day. So, yeah, simple as, again, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. There's an app that you can have along with that, and we're really excited about where that is going. And then you can find us on all the popular social channels. Browns Film BDN on Twitter is another place as well. So thanks for having me, guys.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. As always, good stuff. Jake Burns, again, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.